Hello there, you're following World News live from Algiers. Up next are the headlines. US and Iranian presidents sign a memorandum of understanding to end the war. Washington announces the start of a 60-day negotiation period with Tehran, effective today, while Iran stresses that the Strait of Hormuz will not return to its pre-war status. In Lebanon, several people were killed and wounded in new Zionist strikes on southern towns. Hezbollah says it has repelled Israeli advance attempts in areas of Nabatiyeh, while President Aoun affirms Lebanon's stance regarding the ceasefire. After years of political deadlock, Libya's three governing councils agreed to hold presidential and parliamentary elections in 2027. The UN envoy warns of new proposal to rescue the political process should the UN roadmap fail. Hello and welcome to the details of our program. First up in our news, US President Donald Trump announced early Thursday that he had signed a copy of the Memorandum of Understanding with Iran aimed at ending the war. According to media reports, Trump said during the signing ceremony at the Palace of Versailles in France that reaching the agreement had not been easy, referring to months of talks that had weighed on the region and the global economy. Meanwhile, Axios reported that Trump personally signed a copy of the agreement, adding that an image of the signed document was sent to the Iranians and the mediators. Iran announced that it had officially signed the Memorandum of Understanding with the United States to end the war, noting that the text of the agreement had been finalized and had formally entered into force. Iran's Tasnim news agency quoted Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai as saying that the memorandum is now fully official. He stressed the need for oil sanctions on Iran to be lifted so the country can resume oil exports. Regarding the nuclear issue, Baghai said Iranian nuclear materials would not be sent abroad, explaining that the current option is to dilute enriched uranium.
Right now, as we are talking, I guess the text of the agreement has been officially signed by the presidents of both countries. In fact, early on June 18th. This memorandum is now officially final, since both parties have signed it. However, in any diplomatic process, there are procedures that the parties concerned seek to follow. The views of the mediators are also important in order to bring this process to its intended outcome.
Switzerland's foreign ministry announced that negotiations between the United States and Iran will begin on Friday near the central Swiss city of Lucerne, following the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding aimed at ending the war. In a statement on Thursday, the ministry said the United States and Iran would meet alongside Pakistani and Qatari mediators in the Bergenstock area to begin the first round of talks on implementing the agreement. Earlier, Iran announced that Friday's talks with the United States in Switzerland no longer are certain to take place. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai said early Thursday that the talks previously scheduled for Friday in Switzerland were no longer confirmed. He added that consideration of the meeting had been temporarily suspended after it was decided that the Iranian and US presidents would sign the agreement. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson said that Iran's ballistic missile program is not on the agenda of the upcoming negotiations with the United States, which will be held based on the Memorandum of Understanding signed by the two presidents. In a statement to Iranian state television, Ismail Baghai stressed that Iran's missiles and defensive capabilities will not be subject to discussions in any form, in any track, or with any party, as he put it. The US Central Command, the CENTCOM, announced on Thursday that it had lifted the naval blockade on Iran in line with directives from US President Donald Trump. In a post on X, CENTCOM said its forces are no longer impeding the movement of vessels to and from Iranian ports in the Gulf, adding that U.S. Navy ships will remain in the region to ensure compliance with all provisions of the agreement. Pakistani Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif announced on Thursday that the signing of the agreement between Iran and the United States to end the war in the Middle East means that Tehran will reopen the Strait of Hormuz and that the U.S. blockade on Iranian ports will be lifted immediately. Writing on X, Sharif said the agreement would take effect immediately, noting that Iran, as a first step, would reopen the Strait of Hormuz without delay, while the United States would immediately lift its naval blockade. He also confirmed that a ceremony would be held in Switzerland on Friday to mark what he described as a landmark development and to launch what he called technical talks.
The signing of this agreement at the highest level between the governments concerned demonstrate the commitment of both sides to reaching a diplomatic solution to the conflict. The Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding enters into force immediately, and as a first step, the Islamic Republic of Iran will reopen the Strait of Hormuz without delay, and the United States will immediately lift the naval blockade.
Fateh Birol, Executive Director of the International Energy Agency IAEA, welcomed the temporary agreement to end the war and called for the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz without conditions. Speaking at an event in Istanbul, Birol said several countries would now reassess their energy policies as the possibility of another closure of the Strait of Hormuz can no longer be ruled out, particularly after Iran kept the waterway closed during the war. According to IAEA estimates, the conflict disrupted more than 14 million barrels per day of oil production in the Middle East.
New strategies will be discussed with a number of countries. The crisis has redrawn the global energy map. Trust is a crucial element in global energy markets, which have seen a decline in prices since the agreement to end the war. All parties now realize that the Strait of Hormuz has been closed once, and it can be closed again.
Iran state television reported that the passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz still requires coordination with the naval forces of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The same source added on Thursday that Tehran insists that maritime transit must take place according to agreed rules to ensure the security of vessels, noting that the IRGC Navy escorts commercial ships until they safely pass through the strait. Iran's chief negotiator Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf said that the Strait of Hormuz will not return to its pre-war conditions following the peace agreement between Iran and the United States. In an interview with Iranian television on Wednesday evening, Ghalibaf stressed, however, that Tehran will not ignore international law or established maritime navigation rules, adding that Iran will remain fully within the framework of international law, as he put it.
During the war, I tweeted that the Strait of Hormuz would never return to its former state, and I still hold this view today. But this does not mean that we intend to disregard international law or established rules of navigation. On the contrary, our actions will remain entirely within the bounds of international law.
Iran said it has achieved through negotiations many times more than what it could have obtained through military action. Iran's chief negotiator Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, speaking to Iranian state television on Wednesday evening, described negotiations as a form of struggle, saying that Iran had secured through diplomacy far more than it had sought to achieve militarily. Regarding the halt of attacks on Lebanon, Ghalibaf also reiterated Iran's assertion of victory over the United States and Israel in what he described as their war against Iran. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian on Thursday praised the agreement with the United States, describing it as a historic agreement to end the war in the Middle East. The memorandum, which Pezeshkian and US President Donald Trump signed remotely, is intended to pave the way for negotiations aimed at reaching a final agreement. Pezeshkian posted a copy of the agreement on social media bearing his signature and that of Trump, as well as the signature of Pakistani Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif, whose country mediated between the two sides. The Iranian president accompanied the document with a statement describing it as a historic text and a powerful message from Iran that peace can be achieved through mutual respect. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said on Thursday that the United States is prepared to resume the war and reinstate military action and sanctions if Tehran fails to comply with its commitments under the preliminary Memorandum of Understanding. Speaking on the sidelines of a meeting of NATO defense ministers in Brussels, Hegseth said that U.S. President Donald Trump has been clear that Iran cannot be allowed to possess a nuclear weapon and that any negotiations would be centered on that objective. He added that the U.S. military presence in the Middle East will depend on Tehran's response to and compliance with the Memorandum of Understanding.
And the President has pointed out that we will be prepared to recommence if, underneath the timeline of these talks, Iran does not do what it says it's going to do, which is give up nuclear weapons, give up nuclear ambitions, give away their nuclear material, close nuclear facilities, then the War Department is here and prepared to restart if we need to.
China on Thursday welcomed the signing of the US-Iran agreement aimed at ending the war in the Middle East, calling on both sides to continue cooperating during the next round of negotiations. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian said at a press conference that China welcomes the development and hopes that all parties concerned, including the United States and Iran, will uphold the spirit of the agreement and fulfill their commitments in good faith. He also urged Washington and Tehran to demonstrate what he described as mutual flexibility during the next phase of talks.
美伊双方签署第一阶段谅解备忘录。
The signing of the Memorandum of Understanding for the first stage of negotiations between the United States and Iran is of positive significance for easing tensions and consolidating the momentum for ceasefire. China welcomes it and hopes that all relevant parties, including the United States and Iran, will uphold the spirit of contract and implement it in good faith. Force is no solution.
Iran's leadership has approved a new Memorandum of Understanding with the United States despite reservations as Washington begins lifting its naval blockade of Iranian ports. President Trump says he expects a full ceasefire, though key issues remain unresolved. Nabil Khazini has the full report.
The United States and Iran have taken a significant step towards ending months of confrontation, with both sides now formally signing a Memorandum of Understanding aimed at halting hostilities and opening the door to a wider agreement. Tonight, Iran's supreme leader says he approved the deal, despite what he described as personal reservations. Mujtaba Khamenei said he was persuaded after receiving assurances from President Masoud Pezeshkian and senior officials that Iran's rights and interests would be protected. The agreement marks a notable moment. For years, direct engagement between Washington and Tehran has been politically sensitive. Yet both governments are now publicly backing a framework designed to reduce tensions and prevent a return to conflict. Under the terms of the memorandum, the United States is lifting its naval blockade of Iranian ports. In return, Iran has committed to restoring free commercial navigation through the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most strategically important shipping routes. US President Donald Trump says Washington expects what he called a complete ceasefire on all fronts. The agreement also commits both sides to continue talks rather than return to military action. And now the clock is ticking. US Vice President J.D. Vance says the 60-day negotiating period begins on Thursday. During that time, American and Iranian negotiators will attempt to tackle the most difficult issues left unresolved. What is clear tonight is that the fighting may have paused. The hardest test will be whether this temporary understanding can become a lasting settlement, and the next chapter may already be taking shape. At Switzerland's Borgenstock Resort, preparations are reportedly underway to host the next round of US-Iran peace talks, where negotiators will try to turn this breakthrough into a more durable agreement.
3 Lebanese citizens were killed in Zionist airstrikes on southern Lebanon on Thursday, according to the country's official national news agency. The agency reported that 2 people were killed in an Israeli drone strike that targeted a vehicle in the town of Kafart Benit. Earlier, the NNA had reported also that a young man was killed in the town of Zabdin in separate drone strike that targeted him at dawn on Thursday. Lebanon's Hezbollah announced on Thursday that its forces had successfully repelled Zionist attempts to advance in the Nabatea area of southern Lebanon over the past 4 days. In a statement posted on its Telegram channel, the group said the Israeli forces had attempted to advance toward the town of Kfart Benit and the Ali al-Tahir area through multiple routes backed by intense artillery fire. Hezbollah said it responded by targeting Zionist troop movements and concentrations with rockets, drones and loitering munition. Hezbollah also released video footage which it said showed an operation carried out by the Islamic resistance on June 13th, targeting a Zionist engineering vehicle on the outskirts of the southern Lebanese town of Majd al-Zoun using an Ababil loitering drone. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun said that stability and security in Lebanon is important not only for the region but also for Europe. According to a statement from the Lebanese presidency on Thursday, Aoun said the war had hindered reforms that Lebanon had launched following the formation of the government. He added that Lebanon does not need aid as much as it needs investment, stressing that current efforts are focused on restoring international confidence in the country while also rebuilding Lebanese citizens' trust in the state. At least 3 Palestinians were killed and several others wounded in a Zionist strike targeting the Al Rimal neighborhood in Gaza City. Palestinian media outlets reported on Thursday that the Zionist entity aircraft targeted a vehicle near Abu Khadra Mosque in the Al Rimal district west of Gaza City, resulting in at least 3 fatalities and a number of injuries. Gaza's health ministry announced that hospitals across the Strip received the bodies of 2 people and treated 8 wounded individuals over the past 24 hours. In a statement issued on Thursday, the ministry said the death toll from the Israeli offensive on Gaza since October 7, 2023 has risen to 73,018, while the number of injured has reached 173,273. Injured. The ministry added that since the ceasefire took effect on October 11, 2025, a total of 1,007 people have been killed and 3,165 injured, while 784 bodies have been recovered from under the rubble. The United Nations Security Council is set to hold a public session on Thursday evening to discuss the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, as well as broader developments in the Middle East, including the Palestinian issue, according to the Palestinian news agency WAFA. The Council's 10 elected non-permanent members requested the meeting to address the humanitarian situation in Gaza. WAFA reported that the request was supported by 4 of the Council's 5 permanent members: China, France, Russia and the United Kingdom. This session is expected to include a briefing by Tom Fletcher, the UN Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator. 8 member states of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation have strongly condemned the escalating violence by settlers in the occupied West Bank, holding the Zionist authorities responsible for these attacks. In a statement on Thursday, the foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, Jordan, Qatar, Indonesia and Pakistan called for Israel to be compelled to halt its dangerous escalation in the occupied West Bank and its illegal practices, stop settler violence and hold perpetrators accountable. The ministers also expressed their absolute rejection of the arson attacks on 2 mosques in the West Bank and condemned ongoing unilateral and illegal Zionist measures in the occupied Palestinian territories, warning that such actions fuel instability, violence and extremism and undermine international efforts toward peace. The heads of the House of Representatives, the High Council of State and the Presidential Council have agreed on adopting a roadmap to end the transitional phase, providing for simultaneous presidential and parliamentary elections no later than February 17, 2027, in what they call the Principles Document, published on Thursday following a joint meeting held via Zoom. According to a statement from the High Council of State, the leaders reaffirmed their commitment to constitutional declaration and its amendments, the political agreement and its annexes, as well as a set of understandings aimed at unifying sovereign institutions. The United Nations Support Mission in Libya announced that it will submit a proposal to the Security Council aimed at advancing the political process in the country based on existing agreements in the event that the UN-backed roadmap fails to be implemented. UN Special Representative for Libya Hannah Tete, speaking during a briefing to the UN Security Council on Thursday, said the mission remains committed to an inclusive process involving all parties. She added that Libya's political process has gained some momentum, but stressed that progress remains fragile.
The Libyan people's right to choose their representatives and institutions, to enjoy democratic legitimacy, should not remain indefinitely blocked by institutional paralysis. As previously communicated, if progress in advancing the roadmap is not possible, I will revert to this Council to present a proposal to move the process forward based on the provisions of existing political agreements and where the outcomes of the structured dialogue may provide us with some guidance.
Algeria has called for explicit international recognition of the criminal nature of slavery and colonial practices, as well as the deep human, economic and social consequences they left on the African continent. According to a statement from the Algerian Council of the Nation, in a speech delivered on behalf of President Abdelmajid Tebboune at the high-level consultative conference on restorative justice and historical reparations related to the transatlantic slave trade held in the Ghanaian capital, Accra, Council of the Nation Speaker Azouz Nasri reaffirmed Algeria's full support for initiatives led by the African Union to advance historical justice and reparations. He also welcomed the adoption by the UN General Assembly of a resolution recognizing the transatlantic slave trade as one of the gravest crimes committed against humanity, stressing Algeria's commitment to contributing to African efforts to document colonial and slavery-related crimes, drawing on its own historical experience of resisting settler colonialism.
Algeria welcomes this historic UN decision, viewing it as a practical embodiment of the growing momentum witnessed by the African Union, which was also reflected in its historic decision to extend the 2025 theme titled Justice and Compensation for Africans. Algeria reaffirms its unwavering support for all initiatives undertaken by the African Union and its specialized legal bodies aimed at establishing a clear legal framework that includes slavery and colonialism among the most heinous crimes in human history.
Algeria expresses its deep indignation and strong condemnation following the terrorist attack perpetrated against the Jory Hamani International Airport in Niamey. In this painful circumstance, Algeria reaffirms its full solidarity with the people and government of Niger in the face of this heinous attack, which targets the security and stability of Niger, reiterating its support to Niger's authorities and their fight against terrorism, as well as its commitment to reinforce bilateral and regional cooperation to confront this scourge which aims the peace and security of our common space. The electoral campaign for Algeria's legislative elections, scheduled for July 2nd, continued on Thursday for the 10th consecutive day across the country. During the 9th day of campaigning, leaders of political parties and independent lists held intensive popular rallies across several provinces, calling on Algerians to turn out in large numbers with a particular focus on youth participation. The campaign is being conducted under the full and direct supervision of the National Independent Authority for Elections. It runs for 3 weeks, during which candidates engage directly with citizens to present their ideas and promote their political, economic and social platforms for the upcoming 5-year parliamentary term. This is the end of our news bulletin. Coming up next, our special coverage program.